Every great achievements never come from a comfort zone. Every great achievements never come from a comfort zone. They come from a dedication, guidance and support. By these times, good evening respected directors, the honorable judges and panel present over here. Today, welcome you all into Advanced Coaching Center here. I am Samya Kishore from class 12, Science in PM Shri Kendriya Vidyalaya number 1, Ordinance Factory Khatni. And today, I am going to tell you about a very interesting topic that is about sexual reproduction into a flowering plants. As we have listened about the human reproduction, humans reproduction, the humans reproduce to continue their generation. Like that only plants also reproduce. Now here question arises that why does the plants reproduce? Just because the plants reproduce just forming the fruits and seeds. As we have listened that many kinds of the fertilization into the human reproduction, you will be shocked to know that into the plants also there are three types of fertilization that occurs. First one is the pre-fertilization, second one is the double fertilization, and third one is the post-fertilization. Firstly, let me give a short intro of these fertilization, then after I will tell you about the parts of the flower. Firstly, the pre-fertilization. The pre-fertilization in which the plants reproduce with the anther with the pollen grains. Into this double fertilization, plants reproduce with the pollen grains into the ovary, and into the last scale, the post-fertilization, the ovary convert into the fruit and ovule convert into the seed. As these were the short intro of these three fertilization, after that the reproduction occurs into the flower. Now let me tell you about the flower. As I have talked you about the flowering plants, in this starting only I told you about the flowering plants. Into the flowering plants, the reproduction occurs into the flower, which is also called the reproductive part of the flower. Let me tell you here. First one is the anther. Anther in which the pollen grains comes and they stick on the anther only. And the another one is the filament. Filament, this part is known as this part of the flower is known as the filament. When the anther and the filament come together, they call as the stamen. It is also known as the endoecium. It is the main reproductive part of the flower. Now, another one is the stigma. Stigma is also known as the gynoecium, which is the female reproductive part of the flower. The stigma has also three parts: ovary, style, and the stamen. Stigma, style, and ovary. These are the three parts. When these three parts come together, they are known as the pistil. Now, firstly, let me tell you about the stigma. Now, as I have told about into the anther, when the pollen grains attach with the anther, on that time, these pollen grains transform to the stigma. After that, they go into the style, which is the long stalk part. After that, the pollen grains comes to stigma. After that, they goes from the style to ovary. When they reaches to the ovary, into the ovary there is the presence of ovule, in which they reproduces to form a zygote. After that, they become into the embryo. After that, they form into the seed or the fruit. Now let me tell you about the pollination. As I have talked about the pollen grains, now here the question arises that from where does these pollen grains come? Because they may not come by themselves only. There would be someone who are transforming these pollen grains from somewhere to somewhere. And firstly, let me define you what do you mean by the pollination. By the word of pollination. The pollination means the transfer of the pollen grains from anther to stigma. Now let me show you by a real flower example. As you would be seeing here is the flower of hibiscus. If I will ask you that what is the scientific name of hibiscus, can you even tell me about it? Okay, leave it. If I am here, let me tell you about what is the scientific name of hibiscus. The scientific name of the hibiscus is Hibiscus rosa sinensis, also known as the China rose. In it, I have a perfect example of it by which we can be able to understand very easily. Here, this part is, as you can see here, this part is the main reproductive part of the flower. Here, it is the stigma. These, as you would be seeing that these yellow parts are the pollen grains. If I will plug these, if I will take these pollen grains, if you will do like this, they will transform into the yellow color. If these pollen grains, let me tell you the one interesting facts about these pollen grains. Maybe you would not be knowing about these pollen grains. These pollen grains are rich into the protein. These pollen grains are used to increase the performance of the athletes and the race horses. In some Western countries, like the England, these pollen grains are transformed into the pollen tablets and the pollen syrups, which in this time athletes are using it for increasing their performance. And the pollen grains are also used for enhancing and boosting their digestive system. These kinds of the things are interesting facts about the pollen grains. As the pollination are the parts of the for transforming the pollen grains from anther to stigma, there are the, as you would have till the 11th class, you would have read that there are two types of pollination, self-pollination and the cross-pollination. But here I will tell you that these are the wrong things, because as I have read the three types of the pollination. First one is the autogamy, second one is the getonogamy, and third one is the xenogamy. Firstly, let me explain you about the autogamy. In which autogamy, the pollen grains transfer from the anther to stigma into a same flower. What happens that whenever any insect comes from any another flower to another flower, on that time there is a transformation of the pollen grains by the left. On that time there is when these types of the pollination occur, these are known as the autogamy. The example like the hibiscus. And second one is the xenogamy, which is also known as the allogamy. Into the xenogamy, the transfer of the pollen grains occurs from the different flowers, in which whenever any insect is sitting on any one flower, after reproducing from that flower, it goes to the another flower for taking the pollen grains. On this time, this pollination called is the xenogamy. And third one is the getonogamy. It is one of the different pollination which occurs into the flower, in which what happens that when the transformation of the pollen grains which occurs into the same flower, but the pollen grains are different from another flower. And as I have told about the autogamy, in autogamy also there are the two types, chesmogamy and cleistogamous. Chesmogamous and cleistogamous flower. Into the cleistogamous flower, what happens that the pollination occurs into the closed flower. When the flower has not been, when the flower is only become the bud, it has not become the fully flower. In that only the pollination occurs. And into the chesmogamous flower, the pollination occurs when the flower has become the fully flower and it has been become the open. On that time, these types of the pollination occurs. Now, why the pollination occurs and how does it occur? Into the pollination, there are many of the factors and many of the biotic and abiotic agents. Firstly, let me explain about the biotic agent. It means biotic agent is animal comes. The animals, insect pollination, and second one is the bird pollination. Now, let me tell you, the insect pollination are also known as the entomophily, and into the bird pollination, it is known as the ornithophily. When the most common example is the honeybee. Honeybee is the most common example of the entomophily. It goes from one flower to another flower for the pollination. And the birds also do the pollination, which is called the ornithophily. And second one is the abiotic factor, in which non-living organisms, just like the wind pollination and the water pollination come. Wind pollination is called the anemophily and the water pollination is called the hydrophily. The most common example of the water pollination or the hydrophily is the water hyacinth and water lily. These are the most common example of the hydrophily or water pollination. As you would have seen that the lotus or many kinds of the flower which occurs into the water only, you would be thinking that how these kinds of the pollination occurs, because as I have seen that I have never seen any kinds of the insects which are going on these flowers for doing the pollination. So on that time, from drilling the water into the water only to occur the pollination and transform into the new plant. And the last one is the bad pollination, which is called the crypterophily, in which also these types of three pollination which occur. These are the three biotic and abiotic factors by which the pollination occurs, and also known as the agent of the pollination, by which the pollination are acting for forming the new ones, for forming the new plants or forming the new ones. So these were all about the agent of the pollination and the parts of the pollination. Because as we have seen into their human reproduction, what happens that the fertilization happens into the humans only, but into the flower case, these are the totally different, because these pollination or the reproduction occurs by the agent of the pollination like the insect, water and the wind. These are the important factors for doing the pollination or for reproducing the flowers. So it was all for